reminisce. That's what we often do these days. As we sit around inside our homes, we think about the good old days, past, which we have a lot of control. We saw it happen, and we relished it. A lot of my students ask me, among all the churches that you have pastored, which one has given you much joy? No, I don't need to think very long to answer that question, because it is this church that has made me really fulfilled as a minister. We moved in 1995 to a place called Rancho Estate. And when I heard about it, I felt like, wow, I'm going up the ladder. I'm living in a ranch. And it's quite beautiful home that God has given to us there. And one night, two of the prominent leaders of this church knocked on our doors and said, our pastor is leaving for the United States. You just came back from the US. You have been God's provision for us. As you know, that's how Engineer Cruz speaks. Just very certain of God's will. Of course, I prayed about it. We prayed about it. And after talking to some of the key leaders and some of the people in the church, we felt it was a good fit and we'll try it. Thus began a brief but very sweet journey with this church. This church now stands 50 years on the same spot, an evidence and a witness to God's glory. But now we're living in very strange times, and we have to have an anniversary online. It's beautiful, truly encouraging to hear witnesses, testimonies of people who have come from this church and have been placed all around the islands and all over the globe, continuing in their witness for Jesus. That is indeed the message of this church. This church stands for Jesus, the suffering Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, the victorious Jesus. Lately, I have been reading during this strange period of our history the book of Job again. And this day, I'd like to take you back on chapter 9 of Job. And in verse 12, Job explains his bewilderment on what has happened to him. He says in verse 12, if he snatches away, referring to God, if God snatches away, who can stop him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? A lot of the churches and the sermons this morning online, I bet, is trying to address this very question. God, what are you doing? Exactly what is the point? What are you driving at? What is the agenda? What's the plan? It looks like chaos. It looks like more people are moving away even from a concept of a God of love. With so many people suffering and so many people dying, and so many people living in fear and gripped in shock and agony. I like the wording of Job here when he says, if God snatches away, who can stop him? one of the memorable things of living in the Philippines, and many of you former members of the church are no longer here, but in the Philippines, the best experience there is being snatched. I mean, and my saying it's the best experience because you'll never forget it. Sometimes your jewelry is snatched, your purse is snatched, and it is so sudden. And the timing of these people is so good. I mean, I was with my girlfriend, Carla, riding in a jeepney, and one guy just was trying to get off the jeep and lean on my one of my legs, like he was losing his balance as he was getting up. And once he got up, I realized my wallet was gone, just like that. It was so sudden, and it caught me off guard. It's a good thing Carla was there with me. Then we could go home, and she still has a little bit, few coins left to bring us back to where we came from. But I like the imagery that he uses here when he talks about God. God is snatching something away. These days, God did snatch something away from us. And we were all caught off guard. We're here in our comfortable homes. We're here working on our jobs. We're here raising our children. We're here trying to run a church and do business. And then suddenly, boom, the carpet is pulled from under us. And we landed on the floor. It was so swift. It was so quick. And we didn't know what actually happened. God snatched away our job. God snatched away our resources. God snatched away our friends. God snatched away even our relatives. God snatched away even our church, for that matter. It was so sweet. It was so sudden. But Job asked the question, if God did this, who can stop him? Who will be able to stop God's plan? Of course, Job's understanding here is that everything that has happened in his life is part and parcel God's plan for him. Interestingly, there are many uh, stories, explanations of many Christian preachers and teachers trying to make sense of this pandemic and what God means to do, why He has done or even allowed, quote unquote, this thing. I'll refer you to a good book. There's a good book out there in the internet right now, Desiring God uh, website. John Piper wrote a book, Christ and the Coronavirus. I commend that book to you. It's available for download, MP3, if you want to listen to it, or even just to read it. And when you do, you will realize how this particular view has a point that needs to be heard. Piper says this pandemic is an appointment by God. That's a very powerful statement. We often say that bad things emanate from Satan, bad angels, but it never comes from God. But this is an appointed moment by God, and He even listed several things, several reasons for for why He thinks that is so. We believe, as from our tradition, very strongly on the sovereignty of God. We will never question God's decision, even though sometimes we feel, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it just so sudden and we were just caught off guard. Perhaps we were not vigilant enough. That's why Job says, you can't stop him. And you can't say to God, what are you doing, God? In a sense, by saying this and by stating this, he wants to ask God the very same question. Lord, why did you do this? Lord, what in the world are you actually doing? Who can dispute with him? Verse 14. Who can find words to argue with God? In other words, Job is saying it's futile to engage God in a conversation. And so many of us would try to ask and find meaning about all this. God remains silent. God is speaking to us in ways that are profoundly uh, simple, and yet we need to be able to discern the voice of God from just the mere voice of man trying to explain. He also mentions later on in verse 32 of the same chapter, he is not a man like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there was someone to arbitrate between us. We're trying to make sense. We're trying to draw something from God, to explain what he has done. And of course, you know the story of Job, how he lost everything. He lost his children, precious children. He lost his job, his means of livelihood. He lost all that. He lost his servants. He lost his reputation. He lost his health. My goodness, he lost almost everything. So the question arises, what was God trying to say? What was God trying to do? Job, in his heart, is just asking God, Lord, remove from me the rod so that this terror would no longer frighten me. Isn't that all our prayer these days? With the cases around the world still on a steady climb, we all wonder, Lord, when is it gonna be if you will remove the rod over our heads? But here, I'd like to leave with you a strong message of hope and response. Because Job said in the middle of this chapter in verse 15, he said on the second part of that verse, I could only plead with my judge for mercy. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. Yes, God is the judge. And whatever he decides, we have to trust, even though we may not understand that decision from the judge. But what we need to do is to plead for mercy. That in that decision of his, we will be able to experience his unmerited favor. For all these past years, this church has experienced God's mercy. There have been many things that have happened in these past decades, which proved the truth of God's judgment to the church and to the community. And we have experienced the application of His mercy. So, right now, we are again in an opportune moment to be able to embrace His mercy. Now, mga kapatid, ang biyaya at ang awa ng Diyos ang ating hihingin. Hindi natin hihingin sa Kanya na pagalingin, pawala na ang virus. Lord, kung anuman ang dumating at anuman ang hagupit nito sa amin, kung saan man kami matagpuan, kung anuman ang hahantungan ng trahedyang ito, hayaan niyo ang inyong awa amin maranasan. Yes, we can cling to God's mercy. And I believe that everyone listening right now and watching in this special 50th anniversary of our church, you who are listening right now and watching, you will experience God's special mercy. The judge has spoken and is working his ways all over his creation, and his mercy will be applied to the person, to you, who have humbly submitted before him. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Calvary Baptist Church, Christ's beloved community. Happy anniversary. God bless.